Are we live?
Yeah.
Cool. So, hi guys, welcome to my webinar on how to utilize the power of Microsoft and Baidu to supercharge your event marketing campaigns. I'm David, and I'm a paid media manager at Tag Digital. So just to start off, I'm sharing a quick Slido with you guys. If you've got any questions, just let me know. Submit them through Slido, and we'll come to them at the end, and I'll answer these as best I can. So the webinar today will be split into two parts. So the first part will be going over the Microsoft side of things, and then for part two, we'll be going over Baidu. So for part one, we'll give you a quick introduction to Microsoft. We'll go over the pros, the disadvantages. I'll share a few innovations and some unique features available in Microsoft. And then we'll go over a couple of case studies at the end from some campaigns that we've run and seen some good results from. And then for part two, again, we'll go over an introduction to Baidu. We'll discuss the pros, the cons, and then I'll give my advice on when I think it's best to use Baidu as part of your PPC strategy. So a quick introduction to Microsoft. It's well known that, that Google ranks as #1 in terms of search engine traffic, which gives them a higher market share in terms of usage, but that doesn't mean that the other search engines don't get a good amount of traffic. So yes, Google's gets a majority, but when you think about the amount of traffic and searches that Google gets, even a fraction of this is still a lot. So there are approximately 82.6 million daily searches on Bing, and throughout this webinar, we'll kind of switch between Bing and Microsoft. Bing's the search engine, and Microsoft Ads is the platform. So yeah, there's 82.6 million daily searches on Bing, which is a huge amount, and it shows the popularity of Bing as a way of finding new information. As well as this huge amount of searches, it's estimated that around 48% of users use Bing as a search engine to discover new brands. So when we're thinking about using Bing, we don't need to use this just for events or brands that are well known. This can also be used as a platform for finding new customers, and not just those who know about your event. 73% of users who use Bing are under the age of 45. The average age of users are 38, with the majority being between 35 and 45. And of all these users, 34% have a degree. So for a lot of the campaigns we run, we're trying to appeal to business professionals that are in a senior position, and someone who has a degree and is in their late 30s might well be in that senior position. And therefore, Bing seems like a search engine that would be useful when advertising with a B2B focus. And that's something that Microsoft places a big emphasis on as being very appealing for that B2B audience. 6.7%, again, like I said, might look like a small number when we talk about market share, especially when we mention that Google's got 86.6%. However, this almost 7% accounts for hundreds of millions of users who use Bing to search every day. So like I mentioned, Google's huge, but even having a small fraction of what Google gets is still more than worthwhile. And you're still able to reach a massive audience. So although there's that gulf in market share, Bing is still the second most used search engine in the world after Google. Google is the main one, but obviously a lot of search engines on mobile are defaulted to Google. 35% of users have a household income of over 100K. So this goes back to my point about reaching those more senior business professionals through Bing. If a user is earning a high income, they're likely to be in senior positions, which will help us when we're targeting those with decision-making power. Also, when we mentioned that a lot of the default search engines on mobile are Google, at the same time, a lot of the default browsers on company desktops could be Bing, which can be helping this statistic. And then with a high percentage of users being high earners, this also lends to the stat that Bing users are 22% more likely to complete a purchase and are willing to spend 35% more on a product or service compared to Google users. So based off this, there's a great opportunity there to use Microsoft Ads when it comes to running campaigns where, for instance, your tickets might have costs associated with them. And when we cover these case studies later on, I'll give an example of a campaign that we ran where the tickets did have a cost associated with them, and we did see some really good results. So moving on now to the similarities between Microsoft and Google. So first of all, ad types. Both Microsoft and Google Ads have named their search ads the same. They both have the ability to run responsive search ads and dynamic search ads. And when it comes to responsive display ads on Google, this is an example where Microsoft would kind of try and copy Google in a way, but maybe change it slightly. So on Microsoft ads, we have display ads, but they're called multimedia ads rather than responsive display ads. They don't really serve the same, though, in the sense that Google Display Network is a lot larger than Microsoft's display network. Google has a whole host of millions of websites and apps that they can target, whereas on Microsoft, you're really only able to target MSN, Outlook, and Microsoft Edge, as well as a few other partners. So with this difference in the size of the networks, it's still probably more useful to use Google when generating that brand awareness and display, but it's still useful to run on Microsoft. Extensions. So Microsoft offer a lot of the same extensions that we commonly use for our Google Ads campaigns. When we're setting up these campaigns, the main initial ad extensions we would use is site links, structured snippets, callouts, and image extensions. And then moving on to search and display. So like I said, both platforms have a display and search network. The display network on Microsoft Ads, though, is called the Audience Network, and this is where your ads would appear on sites like Outlook, MSN, and Microsoft Edge. So now moving on to some of the differences. So first of all, targeting. This is actually quite a good benefit of Microsoft Ads in comparison to Google. When we're deciding on what countries to target in Google Ads, for example, we would need to do this at campaign level, meaning if you wanted to target the same audience, but you wanted to target different countries with separate budget, you would have to do this at campaign level, and you'd have to set up 2 campaigns, which would take up more budget. Whereas on Microsoft, we can set the targeting at ad group level, which means we have that more granular approach. We can set the ad groups to target different locations and different time zones within the same campaign. And then one of the less favourable differences between Microsoft Ads and Google Ads is the availability of bid strategies. So on Google Ads, we can set both search and display campaigns to run with conversion-focused bid strategies. But when it comes to Microsoft, the only automated bid strategies we can use are available on search. So you're only able to maximize conversions on search, whereas on the audience ads or the Microsoft version of display ads, you have to use more manual bid strategies. So this can be things like manual cost per click, manual CPM, and manual cost per view. And then I said earlier in the last slide about how Microsoft offered the main extensions that we use in Google Ads, but this is also a difference because there are some features and extensions that aren't available yet on Google that are available in Microsoft Ads that may be useful to our campaigns. So just an example of this would be the filter link extensions in Microsoft. This lets you list categories or features with unique links to each, so you can pre-filter what a user would search when they're on your website and include them in your ads. So for instance, if you're running different ticket types, you could have filter link extensions, for instance, like tickets below $100, tickets below $150, and users can click on that and get taken straight to a ticket price that's within what they're prepared to pay. And then lastly, tracking on Microsoft. If you've ever run social campaigns, you'll know that this is all done through the Facebook and LinkedIn pixel. And this is kind of similar to what we see on Microsoft with their universal event tracking. So on Google Ads, we have a remarketing tag and we have a conversion tag. But on Microsoft, we have one tag that does everything. So if you have the universal event tracking code applied to all pages of your website, you can use this to set up all your remarketing audiences, like your website visitors, and then also track your conversions based on a final URL. We can still use GTM if the final URL isn't available. And then moving on to some benefits of Microsoft Ads. So first of all, lower competition and cost. So because there's less advertisers on Microsoft, it means that the bidding in the auction, there's less advertisers bidding in the auction, which means we can get a lower cost per click. It also means that we don't need to push as much budget towards Microsoft as a platform compared to Google. Secondly, the target audience, we've covered this, they already spend higher. So like I said, this is great for when we're running events with costs associated. And if you do have an event that's running with a ticket that has a cost associated with it, this would be a good platform to test out and see if you can get good results in comparison to Google. On Google, what we tend to see is that free reg campaigns perform really well, but sometimes conversion performance can dip when the ticket goes from free to paid. So this would be a kind of good opportunity to start running Microsoft ads and see if we can maintain that good conversion performance. A large audience is in the US, so if you're running a campaign that targets mainly the US, this would be a great platform to use, as this is where a lot of the users who use the platform reside. 50% of Americans use Bing as their default browser, and 66 million users use Bing in America exclusively, which takes me on to my next point about extra conversions. And this is something that I stress to clients all the time, is that when we're running Microsoft, we can't assume that we're taking conversions from Google. It's always good to look at it as this is a way to get conversions that you might not get by not targeting Microsoft. So because there are those users that use Bing exclusively, by running Microsoft ads, we're able to target users that might not be available to target through Google Ads keywords. And then lastly, revenue. So Microsoft's revenue is increasing year on year, which when we think about how they make their money through ads the same way as Google does. So with the revenue increasing, this suggests that the platform is becoming more popular because it means that advertisers are using this platform more to run ads. So with the platform increasing in popularity, now would really be a good time to get in on that. And then moving on to some cons. So the reach, like we said, there's less volume due to the market share on Microsoft. So we can't reach users at the same scale that we can on Google. And this also means that volume for your search keywords are a lot lower. This just means that we can't scale campaigns the same way we can on Google. And again, we'll cover this when we come to the case studies. Features. So not all the features that we'll cover in a second, they're not always available in all countries. So although the US does tend to get access to most new features first, but with this being the country with the highest market share, this isn't exactly as big a disadvantage as you might think. But if you're running campaigns that don't target the US, then you might not have access to all the features that are available on the platform. And then the market share, it's lower on mobile. So this again can come down to a lot of users having Google as their default browser on their phones. And this means that the gap in market share between Google and Microsoft is even wider when it comes to mobile. So now I'll just cover some unique features. Some aren't actually released yet on Microsoft, but they're coming in the future. But it's something worth thinking about. So firstly, LinkedIn targeting. So in December 2016, LinkedIn was acquired by Microsoft, and they introduced LinkedIn profile targeting in 2018. And this is what I was talking about. Not all features are available in every country. So this is only available in the UK, the US, Canada, France, Germany, and Australia. But with Microsoft owning LinkedIn now, this is something that will only ever be available in Microsoft ads. And again, it's very B2B focused. So if you wanted to access this feature, you really need to start running Microsoft ads. So with this feature, what we can do is we can reach users based on the company they work for, the industry they work in, or the function of their job. This is still something that's relatively untested, so there's still room there to test and find out what strategy works best for you. When it comes to companies that we're targeting, the results need to be. You need to bear in mind that with the results, it can be based on the companies, the industries, and the job functions that we target. So this would just be the same as any other campaigns you run. Year on year, you see what works and what doesn't, and you exclude and include based on the performance of the campaigns the year before. And then, although we have the ability to reach users depending on where they work, we still have to rely on them using Bing to browse the internet. So when you think about the company you're targeting, they might be a large company, but not all the users in that company might use Bing, which means we're not targeting the full amount of people that work in that company. And then next is the smart campaigns. So these have always been around, but they've made some changes recently to compete with Google's newest campaign type, Performance Max. So in September 2022, Microsoft announced some new features that were being added to their smart campaigns, and this was to help them rival the Performance Max campaign. And there's one feature here that's quite different and gives them that competitive advantage over Google, and this is the multi-platform feature. So whilst Google's Performance Max campaign targets users on all of Google's inventory, Microsoft have announced that with this new feature in Smart Campaigns, you'll be able to target users on Google, Facebook, Microsoft, and Instagram. So that's something that would be worth testing. This is only available at the moment to accounts that are registered in the US. I think it's going to be Spain next, but when this does become available, it would be something worth testing. And then lastly, Netflix have announced that they're going to be rolling out ads to the platform to users who are on this cheaper subscription plan. So users now have an option to pay for an ad-free service, but when we think about the amount of users that Netflix have, which is over 220 million, some of these users are going to refuse to pay for a more expensive subscription to watch ad-free TV, quite similar to YouTube and YouTube Premium. In case you still weren't sure on the popularity of Microsoft or the growing popularity of Microsoft, Netflix actually chose Microsoft ahead of other companies, including Google, to host ads on their service. And the way this will probably work is quite similar to connected TV advertising on DV360. We won't be able to track conversions through this, but it would be a great way of reaching a large premium audience and generating awareness for your brand. So now on to some case studies. And the first one is for a logistics event that we ran. So what we learned was that the CPA on Microsoft was lower than Google, although because there wasn't as much search volume on Microsoft, we couldn't scale the best performing campaigns to get as many conversions as Google by pushing more budget here, just because it wouldn't have spent. A large amount of users on Bing were brand aware, so due to the low competition on Microsoft, we were able to achieve these conversions with a low CPA. So the opportunity is there to reach even more users who may already know about your brand. And again, these may be exclusive to Microsoft if they use that as their default browser or their exclusive browser. And you'll be able to convert them cheaper than you would on Google. And then just due to the low competition on Microsoft's auction, we were able to generate traffic with a lower cost per click compared to Google. And then next was for a maritime event, and this was the one where the ticket was paid. And what we've seen again was that conversions were cheaper than on Google. And these are conversions that we might not have achieved on Google, depending on the user search engine preference. Although we pushed budget here to try and maximize conversion performance, not all of the budget spent just because we weren't able to scale the campaigns due to the volume. So this was pushed back to Google. But it was good to see that from a paid ticket point of view, that we were able to convert users at a cheaper CPA, which again, going back to users being 35% more likely to spend or being prepared to spend 35% more on a purchase compared to users on Google. So that's us finished with the Microsoft part of the webinar, and now we'll go on to discuss Baidu as a platform as well. So a quick introduction to Baidu. Mobile accounts for most of the search engine usage in China, and Baidu commands 65% of the search engine market share for all platforms, but most importantly, 85% of mobile search engine market share, which makes this the most dominant platform in China compared to their competitors. On Baidu, there are over 200 million daily active users that use Baidu, and 97% of these users are in China. So the other 3% will be users that will be Chinese users that live outside of China. So some benefits of the platform: it's quite similar to Google. So there's slight differences in ad structure and character count, but we can still use Google copy as a guide for Baidu, which helps us keep the messaging consistent. Rather than 2 descriptions and 3 headlines on Google, Baidu uses 1 to 2 headlines and 1 description. It allows us to reach users in China. So in case you weren't aware, advertising through Google is actually blocked in China, and so Baidu gives us access to this market. There's a massive market share, meaning that Baidu is the dominant search engine in China. So if you wanted to reach users in China, then obviously Baidu would be the best platform to do this. It's kind of like the Google of China, where it is the dominant platform. So to reach these users at scale, Baidu would be the platform of choice. And then there's less clarity on what search results are paid ads. So when you think about Google, when you see an ad, it's kind of obvious that it is an ad and you're being served an ad, and you can deliberately choose to not click on this. On Baidu, it's more native. They blend in more with the search engine results page, which can help increase your click-through rate when users aren't aware that the results of the search are being paid to be shown to them. And then moving on to some disadvantages of Baidu. So firstly, there are a few prerequisites that make it difficult to get started as opposed to just creating a Google Ads account. So first of all, you need to be granted permission to create a Baidu account. You need to submit the documentation to Baidu, like photocopy of your business registration or a bank statement or something similar to this that proves your address in China. You'll also need a Mandarin or a Chinese website to link the ads to. Secondly, you can't link to more than one website per campaign. So if you run multiple events that have multiple URLs, you would need to set up a new account per event, which again would then mean you need to pay the account setup fee per event that you run. And then a main benefit of Google is having multiple keywords and different match types in the one ad group for Google, so that Google's machine learning can optimize the campaigns towards getting the best results. But on Baidu, we have to split these keywords up into different ad groups, so you can't have the same keyword but different match types in the same ad group, which just means that the campaigns won't have as much data to fall back on when they're optimizing for those results. And then lastly, my advice on when I think it would be best to use Baidu. So when you're wanting to target or grow your brand in China, we touched on this, but we can't use Google, so we can only use the platforms available to us. And with Baidu being the biggest platform in China, then it makes more sense to use this platform. When your budget allows for an additional platform to run, so you need to consider your setup fees, your media spend, and your management fee. Again, if you're running multiple events, you'd need to have multiple accounts, which are multiple setup fees. What we would recommend is if you're wanting to run Baidu, you'd need a minimum budget of £5,000, and this would include your media spend, your agency fee, your management fee, and your setup fees. When there's enough time left in the campaign to add an additional platform, so when we're running campaigns, we tend to give a 2-week lead time, but with the additional processes that are involved in setting up an account on Baidu, we would recommend maybe giving like another week for this to be set up. So you need to allow for like a 3-week lead time for your campaigns to be up and running. But at the same time, you want them to be able to run long enough to generate some decent results. So yeah, just if you're thinking about running Baidu, add it in as early as possible. And then similar to point number one, if the event you're promoting in China takes place in China, so this means that you can, if you're running Baidu in China, you can target the local audience. And that pretty much takes us to the end of the webinar. I'll just kind of check if we've got any questions that we can answer. So is Bing the same as Microsoft? So yeah, they are the same. So the only difference is Bing is the search engine, but Microsoft is the ads platform, and it used to be called Bing Ads, but it's just recently been changed to Microsoft Ads. But yeah, they're both owned by Microsoft. And how does ChatGPT benefit Microsoft Ads? At the moment, we're not sure how it's going to benefit the ads, but what we do know is that with Microsoft partnering with ChatGPT, it's increased the market share of Microsoft. So in the first week of announcing that they partnered with ChatGPT, Microsoft had over 100 million daily users. So the main benefit of them having ChatGPT is that they're taking some more users that would probably use Google and bring them over to Microsoft or to Bing, which then increases the volume that we can then target users with on our ads. I think that's everything we've got. So I'll end here, but thank you for joining the webinar. And if you have any more questions, just email me at david@tagdigital.co.uk.